We're getting right back there.
Boys are getting a little bit cold this time of the year.
I bet they are.
Open station track.
One of these for your records?
I did not. Oh my.
Maybe that's it.
You too?
I'm not gonna.
I've been taking a lot of heat because of you.
Oh, I got two too. What's that bottom one? I didn't get that. Or did I?
If you would like to speak to the county board during the public comment time, you must fill out a registration slip and turn it into the county board chair prior to the start of the meeting. Registration slips are located at the front of the room.
Are you ready? I'll get these out.
Where's Mike and
Not yet, but I know.
They're gonna over the loudspeakers. They're gonna play the national anthem. When they take a knee, they're gonna grab them. That was pretty good. What was that? I got the tape recorder too. Oh well.
here?
Got 6:58.
I erased mine. I deleted mine. I hit the wrong button and deleted it.
We got 4 more meetings to go to. That's all you got left. December and January, February, March.
Yeah,
What are you gonna do with yourself then?
I don't know.
Chase mama around the house?
Shit, she's too easy to catch now.
Takes
Gotta
all.
get a young one. So.
Ruthie's gonna come and help
All right,
you get
what
that.
are you sassy asses talking about?
She's gonna come get you set up now.
Is it working
Yeah,
better?
yeah, we got him. I fixed him
Okay.
up right here. Well, he has got it. He just got to turn it back on.
But it's like your
I'll
internet
wait for now.
Oh, okay. I can put it.
Oh, mine come up right away.
If you delete it, you can't get it
One is
back.
just a
Can you?
copy. Or,
I hit the wrong button.
No, I'm not really sure.
auditing.
I downloaded it. I got this in hard copy, so I'm good.
Well, because Barry moved the connector for the Wi-Fi.
Or the
so
router?
I was supposed to tell him if it worked better this month. Because last month we couldn't connect it all, so you got more like bars this time.
Jerry's come up. After I got it figured out.
Huh?
All right,
I think we're all set.
good. How are you today?
Yeah, okay.
Did you tell Jerry that he can't retire?
No, I told him he should retire.
No.
We told him he can't. This is the only fun we have in the
Yeah, it'd be so
These are
boring back
entertainment
there.
back here.
Jerry, if you retire, I promise that I will still, give them some things.
Okay.
Did you write that down, Mark?
Although Mark also told me he was retiring, so I don't know why he's harassing you about not retiring. It's just gonna be you and me, Bob.
Gonna be a whole new back row.
I guess. That's scary.
Hi Dennis, how are you today?
I made you sign too, but
Good, thanks.
guys don't look right to me. You can do that, can't you?
Giant seat.
Throw in the towel.
I am considering it very much.
I'll go one more.
No, I've been considering it. Yeah.
It's cold out there today, isn't it?
I'm 65, Bob. I want to do some things.
All right, it's 7 o'clock, so we are going to call the meeting to order.
Some of this stuff is going to be such.
Megan will do roll call.
Mrs. Krentz?
Here.
Mr. Heisey?
Here.
Mr. Tim?
Here.
Mr. Cap?
Here.
Just.
I made it.
Mr. Eckstein is excused. Mr. Weddy?
Here.
Mrs. Collada?
Here.
Mr. King?
Here.
Mr. Wadel?
Here.
Mr. Rothermel?
Here.
Mr. Kirschner?
Here.
All right, thank you, Megan. We'll stand for silent prayer and pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, next we will move on to, I need an approval of the agenda.
I so move.
Motion by Weddy,
I'll second it.
second by Bernadette. Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, next we need an approval of the minutes of the October 17th, 2017 monthly meeting.
Motion to approve?
Motion by Waddell, second by Cap. Any questions or comments concerning the minutes? All in favor? Opposed, same sign. All right, next we are going to move on to our 2018 budget public hearing. Is there anyone here that would like to speak concerning the budget? All right, then we'll move on. All right, next we're going to go to public comments, and I have to tell you that you please have to keep in mind that the county board will not be able to respond to your comments or ask you any questions. Your comments are informational only. If further action is required, your comments and concerns will be directed to the appropriate department or committee. And we only have one person that is signed up, and that's Carrie Puckstad.
Hi, I just wanted to take this opportunity tonight to introduce Todd Waller. He's been here 2 days. After the first day, the judge congratulated him that he showed up for the second day after spending a whole day in our office. So want you to put a face to the name and certainly stop in and see both of us for a while, or stop in and see Todd anytime. And then I would also like to encourage you to consider the resolution coming up later for the reorganization of our department. I certainly think that the complexity and the responsibilities in our office warrant both of the things that are being asked for in that. So thank you for considering that.
Thank you, Carrie. All right, next we are going to go to unfinished business and consideration and possible action on the following resolutions. Resolution number 17-10-17 to modify the communications sergeant position to communications management lieutenant, manager lieutenant.
Motion to approve?
Okay, a motion by Waddell, second by King. Do you have any questions or comments concerning this position? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Next, we have resolution number 23-10-17, authorizing engagement of Von Briesen and Roper, SC, and Krieger Dickinson, LLC, together with Simons, Hanley, Conroy, LLC, as counsels in relation to the claims against the opioid manufacturers. We have a couple of guests that would like to speak to us. Board.
Good evening. My name is Krista Bache. I'm a partner at the law firm of Krieger Dickinson.
And my name is Steve Nelson. I am a shareholder with the law firm of Von Briesen and Roper in Milwaukee.
We're here tonight. We respectfully appreciate you considering our proposal and the resolution that is before you. We are here to answer any questions you may have about this litigation that we are pursuing on behalf of counties in the state of Wisconsin. We did file our first set of lawsuits today on behalf of 28 Wisconsin counties, and we are very proud of that effort, and we look forward to advancing this very important cause against the opioid manufacturers for causing what we believe is an epidemic, a nationwide epidemic that is certainly impacting this county and many of the departments within this county.
So last month we talked about this a little bit, and you tabled the resolution because you had some questions about the county's ability to sue, and whether it was a state issue. And so I reached out to the law firms that are handling the lawsuits, so they're here tonight to answer your questions about that.
Just touching base on that initial question, the Wisconsin statutes do set forth that the counties of the state of Wisconsin have the ability to sue and be sued, and we are pursuing a deceptive trade practice claim. It's a Wisconsin statutory claim on behalf of the counties. This is a claim that counties in the state of Wisconsin have pursued before. We see no reason why this county or any county in Wisconsin would not have the standing to pursue such an action. And that is the basis for our claim.
I guess some of the questions that they had were perhaps, or, just exactly what would be expected of us as far as information gathering and,
Yes, okay, great question. So just so you understand how this is gonna play out, we filed a set of lawsuits today. They're all identical lawsuits. They're making the same allegations on behalf of a variety of Wisconsin counties. They're independent lawsuits. It's not a class action. It's all independent lawsuits that each county files. We anticipate filing more identical lawsuits in the state of Wisconsin over the upcoming months. Once we get all of the lawsuits in suit, we will at that time have a meeting with representatives from each county, likely corporation counsel, or if another person, whether it's a chair member or a board member, becomes our liaison for the litigation. We'll have a meeting statewide with all of the counties that are involved, with just one or two representatives from their counties. At that meeting, we'll more thoroughly, it'll probably be January or February, so there will be a little bit of time before we start ramping up the next phase of litigation. At that meeting, we're gonna go through how it's gonna work with respect to each county's individual information. And what we're talking about there is, how is your county damaged? What departments within your county are incurring the increased costs? Where are you seeing the harm? A lot of counties are experiencing it within their sheriff's departments, their medical examiners or their coroners, their child protective services, their human health departments. We have a lot of concerns about child placements, the administration of Narcan. We have a list of, we already have developed a list of the areas that we see each county being impacted in. So at this meeting, what we're gonna do is we're gonna be able to break down for each individual county what departments do we believe are impacted, and that's how we're gonna develop a damage model. So that would be the county's involvement in it, is generating or assisting us with generating the information for how the county is impacted by this epidemic. And we'll have a structured way to do that. So there will be man hours involved from a county representative, and then that county representative, as our liaison, will come back and help us coordinate within the county how to gather that information. But we don't foresee it being a substantial burden, certainly not when you weigh it against the extreme costs that this epidemic is costing the counties.
And just so you know, because we get this question a lot from the other counties, and we've been through in front of a lot of counties now, we have retained a document capture retention group that will be coming to the counties, and you're going to identify maybe the person in each department. They're going to interview that person, and then their team will take over the copying of those documents and taking care of all that. We understand that you all have people that work a lot, and we don't want to add a lot more load to them. And
Right.
we thought about that, and it caused two reasons. One, it's a little easier on you, and then we have that one point of contact in each department, and we've got a person and a group that is pulling together everything, and we're doing it consistently in each county, so that we're gathering the data consistently around the counties. Now, not every county is going to be affected the same way. Some counties might have other damages that yours doesn't, but we'll know that, and we'll do that interview to see, with you all, to see what it is you think you have. And we'll ask the questions: did you think about this? Did you think about that? No, that doesn't affect us. We don't have that. Yes, we do have that. And so we want to make it as easy as possible, because we want consistent data from all of our counties, whatever that data is.
That's correct. I think that will be the next phase after the meeting I talked about. Once we break down the structure of each county, the phase after that would be we would send our group, which we've contracted with a group called ILS, which is a document information retrieval group, and then they come in and gather data from each county. But our first step is identifying which departments within this particular county and all of the other counties that we are suing on behalf of, because each county is a little bit different and has a different makeup.
The other thing is that cost of that group that will be assisting us will not be borne by you. The only cost you're going to have is that the cost of that person here who's helping to point them in the right direction. And that's part of their salary or their hourly, however you compensate them. But we take on all those costs. And should this not be a successful litigation, you don't have to pay any of those costs. We're taking that risk on ourselves, because we believe in the lawsuit very strongly, and so we're willing to take that risk. So there would be no out-of-pocket cost, so to speak, for you for that information gathering. Any other questions?
Well, I'm assuming some of this this information that you're gathering is probably confidential information, so how is that handled by your group?
Question.
I think the initial phase, at least the way that we're envisioning it right now, will not be confidential information. The initial phase that we're contemplating is going to be publicly available numbers, financial data. What we're going to be looking at is increases and trends. So we can already see just in information that's publicly available collected by the state's Department of Health Services, increases in, for example, overdoses that are directly attributable to opioids, increases in hospitalizations that are directly attributable to opioids, hospital runs, EMS services. We're already able to see just the numbers where the increases are. So I think the first phase is all going to be publicly available because we're just going to be looking at statistical information and financials, because every time that there's another hospital run, there's a cost associated with it. So we're going to be able to see the increased costs. If you look at just the past 10 years where this epidemic has been developing, the numbers are doubling now almost every year. So if you have a county that you had 10 opioid overdose deaths last year, you likely will have 20 this year. And you're going to be able to see the numbers and the trends that they're creating. I think that will be the first phase that we'll probably be dealing with for most of the first 6 months of 2018. If we venture into the second phase, such that we're going to need to dig deeper and look at the names and the people that fall under those numbers, then we would at that time or even before enter into an appropriate protective order. We are filed within the Eastern District of Wisconsin with Judge Adelman, and there is a form protective order that the Eastern District uses that would protect information in that circumstance. You're not allowed to file names of minors, you're not allowed to file social security numbers, you're not allowed to file any personal identifying information. And certainly the county needs to abide by the statutory powers that govern Chapter 51 records and other county-held records. All of that information would be subject to a protective order that would limit it only into the context of litigation. Of course, our hope will be that we don't go that far down the path. Our hope will be that the story of each county is going to be told in the numbers, because that's where we're seeing it the most at this point.
Question I have is, I understand that you're going to take the brunt of the first go-around with the prices and everything, but having worked at several different law firms, we never did do it for free. And what is it going to cost us once we get past that first part?
The engagement letter that we propose to you is that there will be no costs at any time. The attorneys that we are proposing your county retains will only recover in the event that the county recovers. And at that time, hypothetically, when there's a settlement, as we hope that there would be, it would come back to I assume this board or the members that are sitting in these chairs at that time for approval. And at that time, that would be the only way that we would, or any of the attorneys that work on this case, would recover any funds.
And the agreement is 25% of the recovery, and that includes the costs. The costs are all in that as well. So the attorney fees and costs are 25%.
Thank you.
Yes.
You're just dealing with Wisconsin, correct?
Yes, our firm is a Wisconsin firm, but there are lawsuits filed nationwide, and our co-counsel does have lawsuits filed, state lawsuits filed in 5 other states.
I would think there'd be more strength if you got several states involved with it instead of just.
That's our plan.
We're working on that
Yeah,
right now.
that's our plan.
We've been talking to other surrounding states, and they're a little bit behind Wisconsin, but they are starting to see that there's some momentum building nationally and realizing that they need to get involved with this. So we're hoping to have sort of a Midwestern group, because that'll give us a lot of strength if we do get to the settlement table, that'll give a lot of strength to the group
Yep.
for negotiating on behalf of all the counties' behalfs that we represent.
Yeah, and that's particularly true with the federal cases. So our cases will be filed in federal court because we don't have the big five manufacturers do not have a presence here in Wisconsin. They are not manufacturing drugs here in Wisconsin. They are manufacturing drugs in New York, the state of New York, the state of Pennsylvania. So our co-counsel Simmons Hanley in Connecticut, they have state cases filed in those states on behalf of counties there. We are planning to file the Wisconsin lawsuits. We are also daily in conversations with counties in Minnesota, Iowa, Indiana, other Midwest states, which are also severely impacted by this epidemic. It is nationwide.
Sir?
Is there a reason why you're going with independent suits rather than class action?
This type of lawsuit doesn't set up as a class action because each county has individualized damages. So it's more called like a mass action, but they are all individualized lawsuits. However, when we get to the settlement table, everybody will be considered because they'll want to take care of it all at once. They're not going to want to negotiate with each county because it'll take them forever. They want to get it all done.
Yeah, in other words, it would be very difficult to certify a class in an action like this. So that would be a challenge to do. And no one, in the cases that have been filed so far in the nation, no one has attempted to do that yet, which is a pretty good message to us that other attorneys agree that it would be very difficult to do it. So what we do believe that the Wisconsin cases will be consolidated and that they will be all heard by the same judge and that they'll be put on the same track for discovery and motions, which is a huge advantage for the counties of Wisconsin to work with the same counsel to make sure that they're working on a similar path.
Any other questions?
We did. Today. Today were the first filings in the state of Wisconsin.
And so if they approve this tonight, when do you think the next group would be filed?
I'm anticipating we're going to file next group in 2 weeks. So before Thanksgiving is what we're chalkboarding right now. There will be a national hearing called an MDL, and it's a multi-district litigation on November 30th. So we want to make sure as many Wisconsin counties that want to pursue this litigation are present, represented at that particular hearing. So we want to make sure we file before that date. And then we will likely be filing more lawsuits after that as well, just based on individual counties' calendars and the process of working the resolution through to make sure that it's getting to the vote.
We've been in touch with a lot of counties, and I think in the next week, I don't have a number, but we know a lot are considering it this week as well as next week. So we anticipate following week will be the time when
That's
we
our
file
goal.
again.
So if they approved, other than the resolution and the letter of engagement, which we have copies of, is there anything else that you need from us separately?
No, what I would do is probably work with you and work on making sure that we have the right contact people to keep everybody updated. We have a list to update all of the counties that are involved. And then I would circulate the complaint, which was substantially identical to the complaint that was already filed, and then talk through any other strategic questions that you may want to discuss at that time.
My concern was that it was going to cause a great deal more of work for the department heads from the various departments, Human Service, Board of Health, or Health Department, Sheriff's Department, and so on. And from what you mentioned earlier, this would be minimal and most of the work would be done by your teams?
That's the goal. I mean, there certainly is going to be work that the counties are going to have to undertake. Our goal is that by coordinating, particularly amongst the Wisconsin counties, that by coordinating all of the counties, that we're going to be able to short circuit that, because although each county is different, there's going to be a lot of similarities. So for example, once we understand the structure of your county, we're going to be in a better position to say, okay, these are the people that we know we're going to need to talk to get a specific understanding about how this county was impacted and damaged. So that is our goal. There definitely is going to be county employees and personnel that we're going to need to talk to. There's going to be records that we're going to want to get access hope is that we take that impact and that workload off of you with our plan to organize it in this fashion.
Have you begun this process with any other of the counties
Not
as
in
of yet?
Wisconsin. We have begun the process with Suffolk County, New York. So that was the first county that filed in our team of lawyers. They filed more than a year ago, and they have started the process of how we're going to work through. So they're creating the framework for how we're going to walk through the identification of the key departments and the gathering of information. So my co-counsel, Sarah Burns, who's with the Simmons Hanley firm, has been starting to conduct the initial interviews with the department heads in that county, and she's trying to use that for our framework, so then we can use it here in Wisconsin and in other states that we're working with counties to try to streamline everything. Because the last thing we want to do is put more of a burden on a county that's already being stressed to the max, particularly when our lawsuit is about an epidemic that's stressing everybody to the max.
So what is your timeline to begin this process?
I think that our first meeting is going to be, we're looking at the end of January. I think by then we're going to know how many Wisconsin suits are going to be filed, and then we will gather the initial representative from every county at one most central location. It'll probably be Stevens Point or Wausau, depending on availability. And that will be the initial meeting in January. And then I think after that, there will probably be a period of about 90 days where once we get the structure in place, we're going county by county to get, we'll have like an itinerary that will be like, a couple days with this county, a couple days with this county, where we're gathering information. So I think the first 6 months of next year, and that's just going to be that first layer of information, the publicly available statistical information. I think best case scenario is we have that done by next summer, and that's about the fastest that I can see that going. It's much more likely that it would slow down and go slower than that, just because things happen in lawsuits, and we get involved with motions and hearings and things happening on the national level. There might be detours that would delay that process.
The idea is to do it in a manner so that ahead of time you're going to know what we're going to be looking for. We're not going to say, hey, get this for us by next week, just out of the blue. This is going to be discussed for a long period of time, and then we're going to set up a schedule. So people will be expecting it, and they're going to know what areas we're looking at. And there should be no surprises. It's all about communication on these big cases.
Any other questions? At this time, I'd like to give our department heads a chance to, if they have any questions, as long as you're here. Any questions?
Just one, so in preparation for you coming tonight, the board had asked for a rough draft or a rough estimate on from human services. So we just very preliminary numbers. We looked at what was spent in treatment, specifically either outpatient or inpatient, around opioid use, and then also for your right child protection services. We estimated that we had about 60 cases in the last year that we responded due to opioid use, and then the cost of about 10 of those cases went into ongoing services, even as we had to deal with these folks ongoing. So we estimated that the kind of, first of all, I guess two questions. One is, we estimated we're a fairly small county, but we estimated that was between 160,000 and 175,000 for the last year. First of all, does that seem on track for a small county to you? And then secondly, is that the kind of information you're going to want us to gather, or are we missing something?
So yes and yes. The way that we are envisioning it going forward. Now, granted, this is the preliminary. We're basing this off a framework that we want to make sure extends to all the counties. The way we're envisioning it is we'll have a list of exactly that information. Like, this is the information we want to gather in that preliminary stage, and it will go back probably 5 or 6 years. So we'll want to see the trends, probably starting, if we could go back all the way to 2005, which is before where we really believe this epidemic started. I think that would be powerful, but I think it's more likely we're just going to look in the 2010 and on, 2012 and on phase, and then we will be gathering that information with like a bullet point list is the goal. And then we'll also be needing to involve our experts in a later stage to anticipate what we're going to be looking at going forward. Because once you're able to see the trends, you're able to predict where it's going to go and how much money is the county going to need in the future.
So then my follow-up question to that would be, so you're looking at trends, and I think overall our numbers have, they do go up, but I don't know if our expenses so much have, because we have other programs in the state of Wisconsin, and the safety services, we have other funding sources that we didn't have before. So I don't know if we're, as a county, spending, you know what I mean? I'm not sure if the trend is more money being spent as much as it is being shifted around. Does that make sense? And if so, is that information still beneficial to you?
Yes, it is. I mean, even if you're shifting money around, even if you have a grant, even if the county has an opioid-specific grant, it's still money that is publicly available funds that could be used in a different atmosphere. So it absolutely is. And it's all money that ties back to, the original conduct of these defendants when they marketed these drugs with a lie.
Right. Thank you very much for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us this evening.
All right, so now we're going to go on. Do we have a motion on the resolution?
I would move to approve the resolution.
Second. Motion by Weddy, second by Kirschner. Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. All right, we are going to move on to new business, and that will begin with the county administrator's monthly report.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The main crux of what I'm going to talk about tonight is the budget, obviously, but just some other things that are relevant for this month. This morning and this afternoon, we had the first and second meetings of employees to discuss our new health care plan, and that seems to have gone very, very well. So we'll be rolling that out. That will take effect in January. As you heard from Terry, we have a new department director, and we're very pleased with that hire that you approved last month, and we are filling other positions as well. There's some reorganization that's going on, as you can see from your agenda, and that will be coming to you at a later date, either within the next month or so, before the end of the year. That's all I have, unless somebody has some questions.
Thank you. Next, we're going to have the Child Support Office Annual Report, and that will be given by Director Kim Stebbins.
Good evening. First, I want to show you, this is an organizational chart. We are overseen by the Office of Child Support Enforcement. They are the federal administrators of the child support program. And then you have the Bureau of Child Support, which is Wisconsin's, they manage the child support program here in Wisconsin. At the county level, we have myself as the director. Our corporation counsel, Ruth Zalski, represents the state of Wisconsin when we appear in court hearings. And then we have 3 specialists. So what we do, child support creates economic security for hundreds of thousands of Wisconsin children. The program ensures that parents take responsibility for the care and well-being of their children, supports involvement of parents in their children's lives, and provides services to both custodial and non-custodial parents. Agencies can assist families by establishing paternity for fathers of children born outside of the marriage, establishing a child support or medical support order, enforcing or modifying an existing support order, and by referrals to job services. A couple of the job services we do refer individuals to is the W-2 program and the FSET program. Agency performance. We run on a federal fiscal year, so our fiscal year runs from October 1st through September 30th of the following year. So as of September 30th, we had about 1,100 cases. That number does fluctuate up and down a little bit. Our federal fiscal year 17 performance rates, we have 4 different measures here. All have a goal of 80%. So of all the court orders that, the cases that needed a court order established, 91% of our cases had a court order established within that fiscal year. For paternity establishment, you'll see that it's over 100%, 108. That's because we start and finish, because of that fiscal year, we start and finish cases for paternity. So current support collection, we just are short of the goal of 80%, so about 80% of the amount, it compares the amount owed compared to the amount due, how much we've collected, so we're just about at the 80%, almost there. Arrears collection, about 81%, so we're over and reached the goal. We've increased our current support and arrears collections over the last year. Another interesting thing I've kind of compared over the last 5 years, we have increased our arrears collection, which is past support. We've increased that by 4%. We also receive funding for finding private health insurance for children that are receiving medical assistance. So the goal is getting them off of Badger Care. We were able to add 40, in 40 cases, we were able to add health insurance. And the state of Wisconsin provides funding for our agency for finding private insurance for those children. We get $39.53 per case, and so we've received a little over $1,500, and those funds are, excuse me, those funds are eligible for federal matching. Wisconsin is top-notch. We are now second in the nation for current support collection. Last year we were third in the nation. Pennsylvania would be the first in the nation for collecting current child support. Wisconsin's child support program is one of the most efficient programs in the nation. For every $1 invested in the program, Wisconsin child support agencies collect an average of $6.76. Wisconsin agencies collected $658 million in child support in 2016, and we have 74 county and tribal child support agencies that provide direct case management services to more than 360,000 child support cases here in Wisconsin. 2017 highlights, I have that we had collected $3.1 million in current support that was owed on Waushara County cases last fiscal year. Excuse me, those were how much was owed, and we actually collected 2.5, which represents the almost 80%. Governor Walker proclaimed August as Child Support Awareness Month, and our association, the WCSEA, named Judge Guy Dutcher as the Judiciary of the Year this past year. We also started e-filing, so all of our documents from February on have all gone through the electronic filing process, and I feel like that has been a great transition. I think it's faster to get receiving documents back, so we really are happy with that process. And that's all I have, unless you have any questions for me.
This for Kim.
Thank you.
Great job, Kim. Thank you very much. Next, we are going to have a report by Veteran Service Office, his annual report, and I didn't steal his thunder. He gets to...
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. And I'm going to wish everybody a happy Veterans Day this month. As we know, Veterans Day is coming up, and so we're celebrating our veterans.
All right. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. In front of you, you should have a report. Mark? Any questions? No, you're not getting off that easy. You're not getting off that easy. All right, just orienting you to the report. It's pretty quick and easy. Just a year at a glance. Some of the numbers, about 8,300 records. Although the federal government estimates we only have 2,400 veterans in the county, I've been adding and subtracting them as they come into the county and pass away, and my estimation is closer to 2,800. In 2016, met with about 669 veterans and their dependents, resulting in over 10,000 traceable actions. Pretty routine year. There were no big surprises. We're seeing less and less use of Wisconsin Department of Veterans Affairs or state-level benefits here in Waushara County. I think a big chunk of that is, basically the lack of a school. I am seeing a little bump in the use of the Wisconsin property tax credit for 100% service-connected disabled vets. 2016, we saw some big changes that stemmed from a 2015 law change that affected how the state support to county veteran service offices was managed. Although we were faced with a pretty significant hurdle in gaining those grants, we were successful in 2016. I have to double check how I do my numbers, because the 8,500 under budget, that's the difference between what I estimated and what we actually spent. But because of some pretty big contributions, the realization of some grants, we actually ended up turning about 23,000 back into the county from the veteran services in 2016. A lot of my time in 2016 was spent on state issues. I had been elected as the president of the State Association of County Veteran Service Officers, and I'll put it tactfully, it was a very interesting year. I'm continuing down the path to seek accreditation through the National Association of County Veteran Service Officers as a certified veterans advocate. That's a higher level of training where we dig a little more into precedent-setting cases, case law. The folks that are actually teaching that course, one is the legal writing professor from the University of Iowa, and the other is probably the nation's most recognized veterans attorney, Katrina Eagle from San Diego. It is a really eye-opening training. Early in 2016, we saw some policy changes, some legislative efforts from the State Department of Veterans Affairs that would have really negatively impacted benefits delivery to veterans in the state of Wisconsin. As the president of the State Association of County Veteran Service Officers, I got involved pretty heavily in opposing those efforts. And where we stand today is an entirely different picture of where we stood in February of 2016. I did work with Wisconsin Counties Association, a lot of veterans community stakeholders, veterans organizations, legislators, and we got that whole effort turned around. Looking at 2017, currently we are looking at coming in significantly under budget. Couple of big things there. The community has been extremely generous. We are seeing more donations now to assist needy veterans than we have ever realized in the past. And due to a happy circumstance in the Joint Finance Committee, it looks like I'll be able to get our state grant for the office twice this year. Because last year it was a reimbursement and it was credited to this year, and Joint Finance Committee reversed that with the budget, turned it back to a block grant, and I'll be able to apply for it again. In October, I rolled off of the leadership team for the State Association of County Veteran Service Officers. Basically, my turn in the barrel is up. I do continue to be involved on some specialty committees looking at grant reform, but I did step away from my role there. again, continuing in the CVA, and right now I am being actively recruited by the National Association of County Veteran Service Officers to be on their Washington, D.C. legislative team. I'm kicking that can down the road a little bit. I got some stuff I need to do in the office. So, working with WDVA to change policy that negatively affected the officers. I'm going to actually say worked with WDVA because we managed to get all of the adverse actions turned around and headed in the right direction. One of the big things was in 2016 we also saw a restriction on access to veterans databases at the state level. I sat down with Chad Copeland, who is the lead counsel for Wisconsin Department of Veterans Affairs, and he and I hashed out a memorandum of understanding that reopened the access and actually expanded it to include the Defense Personnel Records Information System. So now we actually have access to some federal information through the state also. The State Association of County Veteran Service Officers is working on some pretty exciting collaborative initiatives with WDVA. Like I said, February of 2016, we were in a fight for our lives as county veteran service officers. Today we're actually being actively sought out by state legislators, being sought out by veteran service organizations, and being sought out by leadership at the Wisconsin Department of Veterans Affairs to help them plan veteran services benefits delivery going into the future. Where we're going, boy, over the last few years we've seen some huge changes in the electronic processes that we use to file claims, interact with the federal VA. There were a couple of initiatives that looked like they held promise, looked like the wave of the future. They're now in the past. We're seeing a lot more of an effort to. Now, how many people have ever lived through the conversion from paper to a paperless environment? Basically, what they do is they lower the production of that paper to the lowest level. That means it's me. We're seeing a lot of the federal VA work being lowered down to these offices. The latest, the DRC, or Decision Ready Claim Process, actually places the responsibility for scheduling compensation and pension examinations on my desk, evaluating that evidence, and then creating a claim after the exam has been done. That is a huge change and a huge increase in the workload that we're realizing here at the local office. Still, the main population we're dealing with is Vietnam vets, but we're seeing an increase in the current era veterans, which I think is good. When we're dealing with the current crop of veterans, we're dealing with the most complex exposure picture that we've ever seen in a population of veterans. And the long-term health effects are just partially understood. This adds to the complexity of not only the laws backing them up, the claims processes, but the need for a strong medical understanding of what's going on and how we can best leverage federal benefits based on those exposures and those ongoing illnesses. Just on my desk, late last year, a law was passed that changes the benefits delivery system for disability claims in its entirety. Some of these changes are fantastic. It places timeliness standards on the federal VA. That's something that's never existed before. And it gives veterans more control over how their claim is processed by that federal agency. How they're going to ramp this up just landed on my desk yesterday evening. Haven't had a chance to digest it yet, but I'll definitely get the word back to this board through my committee. Challenges we face, I already mentioned it. Claims are getting more complex. Focus on pretty intense medical knowledge, a lot of medical research, and legal process is really key in the prosecution of a claim now. It's a level of expertise that has never been expected at this level before. It used to be that level of expertise belonged to the Veterans Administration. But as claims are being lowered to my level, and more of the impetus behind a claim has to be placed up front, it's really increasing the time it takes to research and develop a claim. The changes in the processes themselves. It seems every other day I'm learning a new computer program. That's an interesting process to go through while we're facing the complexity of the claims themselves. VA healthcare continues to be a burden on veterans. Some major changes over the past 3 years specifically, and they're going to change more. I may have talked last year about Stab v. McDonald. That was how the VA was mishandling the mill bill. Although the case is basically closed, the VA is successfully kicking that can down the road and still isn't paying for emergency room bills for veterans that they've mishandled for the last 8 years. Big one, and translating paper records to digital files. On the practical sense, I'm running out of room in my office. On the other side is the security of those records. At this point, having paper files is potentially putting some of that information at risk. That was pointed out in the HIPAA compliance study. So I'm going to be approaching this body in the future to see how we might be able to address that need. I already mentioned 2016, pretty normal, no big surprises in federal law. Production was pretty standard, really comparable to 2015. Most of the office focus was on the state issues, and really looking at how we're going to develop more specialized knowledge and skill sets. Subject to your questions. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention. In the report, as I do every year now, is a quick look at veterans charities. We are heading into the holiday season, which means more of a focus on people calling you asking for money. All I can say is educate yourselves. There's a lot of resources. There's going to be an article hopefully coming out in the Argus this week. And talking about charities and how to protect yourselves. And if you have any questions, you can always give me a shout. Thank you.
And I've been told also that if you want to donate your money to our local VSO.
Give local, give often.
So, then you know it's going to our veterans. Any questions for Bill? Do you want to invite them to the veterans here to your luncheon tomorrow?
You bet. May have seen it in the Argus last week. The Wautoma Rotary is offering a free lunch for veterans tomorrow at the World War II Memorial, noon to 1. We've got First Sergeant Craig Cook from the 120th Field Artillery coming in to give us an update on Wisconsin Army National Guard involvement in state and international affairs. It's a good time to sit down and chat with other vets. If you are interested in coming, give me a shout either tonight or first thing tomorrow. I'll make sure we got a meal for you.
Thank you very much. All right, next we are going to go to Fox Valley Technical College and Wautoma Area School District, bringing opportunities to the region. Patty Jorgensen, Fox Valley Tech Vice President in Student and Community Development, and Jeff Kajabuski from Wautoma Area School District Administrator.
I'm Patty. That's Jeff. Just to clear that up right away. So thank you so much for the opportunity. We want to just give you a brief presentation about our activities in this region, and we've got some exciting things to talk with you about, and we're going to talk about it from the perspective of our very strong partnership between Fox Valley Technical College and the Wautoma Area School District. So we're going to give you a little bit of information about the history, some of our future plans, including the building and programming, and then give you a few minutes at the end if you'd like to ask questions. We'll also be asking for some support from you. So let me see. I should have practiced. Very, very briefly, the mission of Fox Valley Technical College, I've got the long version up there, but really what we do is we train people for employment. Very, very simple. I put the vision up there because we want to be more than a building with training. We believe that the type of training we offer is also a catalyst for communities who want to invest in economic growth. And the other thing I want to point out on this slide is the cutout over on the right-hand side. By statute, our service area is defined as 5 full counties, of which Waushara County is one of them, and very small parts of 4 more. So Waushara County is on the very far southwestern portion of our service district.
About 2 years ago, I actually came to you to talk to you a little bit about our Focus 2025, where we did strategic planning for the district, asked the community to give us input. A big part of what came out of that meeting was we really want to create more opportunities for our kids, especially post high school opportunities. Well, what's really happened is this has become a big focus, and it's going to create enormous amounts of opportunities for our kids. We actually started working with Fox Valley Tech in 96, 97. When I first came to town, we actually created a distance learning partnership with 27 other high schools, so our kids could get access to veterinary science, agriculture courses, police science, which we could never afford to employ teachers to do that, so they could actually, 2 or 3 kids could take this course from Fox Valley Tech, and that partnership has grown ever since.
So a couple of unique things about, so I've got the districts, our district is outlined on the map here. A couple of unique things. There's a lot of unique things about Waushara County and Wautoma, and particularly from our perspective as we look at our entire district. The orientation with regard to the rest of our district, this is probably no surprise to you at all, but Wautoma is viewed as really, really far away from large cities. And so this is something that we've grappled with a lot. Really Appleton is 59 miles, but it is not a straight shot, and people do not view that as an easy drive at all, which speaks to our need to provide the programming over in this area rather than hope that people will drive either to Appleton or Oshkosh. The other thing I want to point out with this map here is Wautoma bumps up against 3 other technical college districts. So right directly to the west, and it's literally probably 5 or 6 miles, is the Mid-State Technical College District. Right directly to the south is Madison, and then to the slight south east is Moraine Park. When we consider this service area, we've also considered 13 K-12 school districts that are within 30 miles radius of Wautoma. Normally, we don't cross over into other technical college districts. There's nobody that really polices that, but it's just an understanding. But in this particular case, if you draw a circle around Wautoma and you capture those 13 school districts, none of them are being well served by the technical college districts that really are their home districts. And we've had conversations with our technical college partners about that as well. And all of those districts are on the far reaches of every one of those technical college districts. So, so hold that thought.
And one of the things, as I said earlier, is the county, as you're well aware, is we do not have a lot of money here. The majority of our population is very poor. And traveling 59 miles to Appleton to go to technical college is really a barrier. A lot of them can't get from here to Red Granite, much less from here to Appleton or here to Oshkosh. So really, having this building right on our high school campus is going to be phenomenal. We already have, Patty's going to share with you in a little bit, statistics of how many kids are already using Fox Valley Tech and having advanced standing when they get there. And again, the one thing to remember is in our school district, the only school district that's in our immediate vicinity that has the same poverty numbers is Adams Friendship. Otherwise, you're looking at Milwaukee, you're looking at Menominee Indian, you're looking at places like that that have these kind of numbers for poverty.
So as far as Fox Valley Technical College is considered, some of you may know this, but Wautoma was our very first regional center in 1978. And we've since put regional centers in Chilton, Clintonville, Waupaca, and we have a campus designation in Oshkosh. The types of things we offer to people now are, we think of them in terms of who the target population is. So it's adult learners or K-12 students in high school. For the adult learners, there are hobby courses and fun types of things, quilting classes, things like that. We offer adult basic education for people who didn't finish their high school credential. They can come to us and they can complete their credential. And we also offer program-related courses for people who want training in a particular type of programming. Two examples of things that we offer quite often here in Wautoma are the Responsible Beverage and the Safe Serve programs. Both of those lead to, they're short courses. They also lead to certification for people to be able to work in food service. The other thing that is a substantial part of what we do is what Jeff was talking about before. Is that something we need to pay attention to?
That's just Brian. Oh, okay.
Oh, thought we had all run out or something. No, well, I could. You wouldn't want me to, but we've put a tremendous amount of focus on building pathways to employment, starting with kids that are in high school. So sophomores, juniors, seniors, by the time they graduate from high school, they've got credentials that will get them employment right away. And they also always have two options. One example is work we've been doing, the high school, Mayville Engineering Corporation, and Fox Valley Technical College in our welding facility. We've been offering students, they come from the high school, they've been completing a credential in welding and being hired right away by Mayville Engineering Corporation or by other small local employers. The other types of programming that we offer, general education, IT, interior design, intro to business, medical terminology, health careers. The small graph over on the right-hand side there shows the growth in the number of high school students that have been taking Fox Valley Technical College programming over the years. The number is a dash. It's kind of behind the logo for 2017-18, but from what I understand, it's going to top 170 kids are going to be served through dual credit courses, which is really pretty exciting.
As Patty talked about just a little bit earlier, this really started through distance learning, but then morphed into something more with the Welding Academy. And recently, not recently, I guess it's been 4 or 5 years, Jessica Lloyd is actually the welding instructor, and she has a way with kids, especially the high-risk kids that normally probably wouldn't even get a diploma. Now we're competing in national contests in welding. And we've had a number just the last 2 or 3 years. One student, when he graduated from high school, was offered a job making 6 figures underwater welding. All he had was those courses that are offered at the tech center here. And that's just an example of some of the things that she's doing. We're talking to all the area manufacturing employers, because they can't find people. They said everybody in Waushara County that wants a job already has one, so we have to start working at a younger age, and that's part of the impetus behind all of this.
So a little bit about our decision to put a new building here in Wautoma, and that's kind of where we're headed here. The very first thing that happened about 1.5 years ago, we share a building with Specialty Enterprises over on Pickle Row, 123 Pickle Row. And that building went up for sale. It was owned by Cap Services. Specialty Enterprises has since bought it, and they're leasing it to us, but our time is limited in that building. And so the other thing is, you know, when you sit back and you take a real honest look at the service that you provide to an area, we as a college, we've been in 3 different buildings here, and none of the 3 have been up to the image standards of the types of buildings we have in other locations. And, you know, they really don't speak to people like, I really want to go in there and learn something. If you know where the building is right now, we're part of the Cap Cell building. You know, it serves its purpose, but it doesn't draw people in there. It doesn't speak to people that exciting things are going on there.
Just saying nicely,
I know, I'm trying to say it really nicely. I don't know, but it doesn't have the image that we want to have here. Early in our conversations, we started talking with Jeff, who's been a really great partner for a lot of years, talking about, you know, what would it look like if we decided to put a building here in Wautoma? Well, very, very quickly, Jeff offered up the land. Jeff and his president offered the school district land right adjacent to where the high school is located, where the yellow house is. We'll talk about the yellow house in a second. And that made the decision very, very easy for us. I had mentioned earlier the 13 K-12 districts within 30 miles. Critical to the success of a new building here, and it isn't only Wautoma that can benefit from the types of training that we do. We've had conversations with the other school district superintendents within this 30 miles, and we had two questions. First of all, do you have kids that want this type of training? Absolutely, yes. Are you getting this type of training now? And I guess it's three questions. And would you be willing to send kids from your school, Iola, Berlin, to Wautoma to receive this training? They're desperate for opportunities, and they're absolutely willing to send kids to Wautoma to get that type of training. The other key thing here is that we intend to capitalize on what's working. That welding academy is really something to behold. And so we want to build on that.
This isn't all my doing. There's been a whole pile of people involved. But the people that are listed up here are actually partners that have committed to help making sure this campus succeeds. I don't know how many of them have committed financially.
We're working on that.
Yeah, exactly. But as you can see up there, those are people in the area that, to this point, really haven't been served by anybody else. And we're actually talking to them one-on-one, say, how can we help you? What do you need? And so far, so good.
Very, very positive responses. So future program pathways, we've talked a little bit about most of those. We're going to have cornerstone programming in manufacturing, so the welding. We're going to have an industrial maintenance lab. Healthcare, certified nursing assistants and medical assistants in this region is another desperate need. Truck driving, business and entrepreneurship, agriculture, fire protection and emergency medical technician training, and then entrepreneurship, business, marketing, sort of those clusters. So the planning and the timeline, we've been doing the business outreach for a long time. All of our programs are informed by businesses. We don't offer anything unless it meets a business need. So we've continued to use the business input to match the programming that we intend to offer. Ongoing engagement of K-12 and community leaders, that's part of the reason we're here tonight. We're building the program and the course schedules, and sort of the motivator for that are the K-12s do their planning really early. So by Thanksgiving, we want to get program plans and course schedules to the K-12s so they can start planning for next fall. January 23rd, our technical college system, that's what WTCS is, has a series of approvals that we need to go through, and the final one will be January 23rd. Now this is the part I want you to pay really close attention to because it's my favorite part. But the yellow building, Jeff and his staff will be vacating the house that is the current administrative offices, I think by December 7th, you said, right? So we have to get rid of the building. We offer fire protection services. We also have fire protection professionals in the area that need training. So between our students and our instructors and some of the volunteer fighters in the area, we're going to be burning the house down. And that will happen. It's scheduled for February 24th with a weather date for the week after. So it's a Saturday morning. In this region, you got to make a big deal out of things that are a big deal. So we're going to make a big deal out of the burn and invite the communities, and everybody can be a part of the planning and the excitement that's building. So early April, we're anticipating hopefully the frost will be gone and we can start construction, and our plan is to open the doors by mid-August. So the estimated project costs, this is a very abbreviated version. There's a couple of key points that I want to draw to your attention here. The construction cost, the overall cost is $3.68 million. One very key component here is Fox Valley Technical College, any of the technical colleges by statute are allowed to spend $1.5 million maximum in new building a year. So we're limited to spending $1.5 million. And you can see in that second column there, we are needing to go to other funding sources to find the rest of that money. And the good news is we've found a significant portion of that, which I'll outline on the next slide here. So the initial need beyond what Fox Valley Technical College can put up, that leaves us with $1.67 million. The land that was donated from the school district accounts for $170,000 of that. Excuse me. Fox Valley Technical College has a foundation whose mission, it's a separate 501c3. Its mission is to make our training possible for people, and so they've earmarked $1 million toward the construction. We also have a very strong partnership with Barnes & Noble. They are our college bookstore, and we have a profit share program through them, and that we've earmarked $250,000 of that. And so that leaves us with a remaining need of $250,000. And part of the reason, I didn't remember if I had another slide or not. Part of the reason that we're here today is to ask for your support. As Jeff had explained, we've been going to employers and we've been talking to employers about naming rights and funding opportunities. But we're also here to ask the county for support to the tune of $25,000 over the course of 5 years. So I don't know, that's not a motion or anything? Okay.
5,000 a year, not 25,000.
Right.
I did want to speak on this, and you know I send all of you supervisors a somewhat nice, sometimes serious message every Sunday night. And I discussed this, and I said that I'm very excited about this project, but I didn't want to give you any detail because I didn't want to steal Jeff and Patty's thunder. But just so you understand where this is coming from, I first met with these two fine people back, I think in August, and they told me about this. And I think it's a wonderful thing. One of the things that I'm always talking to all of you about is economic development, and this isn't something that I'm just obsessed with, you know, like somebody would obsessive compulsive disorder. It's because it is an integral part of government. As you know, and we'll talk about this a little bit later with the budget, on the local level and government really in general, the demand for services, the expenses to provide government is continuously going up, but our revenue sources are stagnant. We're not having a lot of people move into the community, people building big things or things of that sort that we can use for property tax revenue. The only thing we can do is improve our tax base, and that has to be done through commercial activity, whether it's shopping or people purchasing homes or furniture or whatever. And the way to get that done is to have people who live here, work here, earn money, and spend the money here. The problem we have, and I know this is with as far as jobs go, manufacturing is a very good source of well-paying jobs. Those are the things we should be chasing. But the problem we have, and the problem that exists in other parts of Wisconsin and throughout the rest of the country, is we don't have the necessary labor force to attract manufacturers here. This is a chicken and egg dilemma, and that we can't attract manufacturers to come here to Waushara County because we don't have the labor force they need, and we don't have the labor force they need because we don't have those jobs in place for people to move here. So this is a way to get off center. This is something that Fox Valley and Wautoma is going to do, and what this will do is it will allow our young people to get those skills to not only increase their income but improve their lives, but also to improve the community. And if we get more and more people with these skills, whether it's welding or something else, we may be able to attract those sorts of employers. As it stands right now in Waushara County, county government is the largest employer. That really bothers me. My goal would be, before I leave here, is to have Waushara County as the number 3 or number 4 employer, and that doesn't mean we're going to be slashing staff, but I would love to see the private sector employing people, because we should not be the largest employer in the county, and that's not something that's necessarily healthy. So this proposed investment, and it is an investment, it's not a gift, it's not an expense, is $25,000. That's $5,000 a year over the next 5 years. That is just pennies on the dollar for what we will get in return for this. And it's an investment not just in Fox Valley, but the Wautoma School District, but also it's an investment in Waushara County. It's an investment in our young people. It's an investment in our county. It's an investment in the future. So I wanted to tell you all that. I didn't want to tell you that last night with my message because I wanted you to hear from Patty and Jeff. But we will go ahead and we'll bring this to the board for next month, and I hope you are receptive to it. It is a small investment, but it is something that will pay off in spades. Thank you.
So just To close, Jeff is holding a rendering. This is, if you're standing in the middle of 2122 that goes south and facing the high school, this is the way the building will look, we anticipate. Sort of kitty corner from the high school, so I don't know how many feet. Not very far, so.
And one of the things that Mr. City mentioned is the economic development this will cause. Currently, we have families that have been in poverty for generations and generations and generations. Our hope is this is the opportunity to break that cycle and increase the jobs and people working in this community. Not just this community, but the entire community.
So do you have any questions that we can answer for you?
I do. I was at a meeting of Fox Valley Workforce Development, and it is their understanding, or we were told, that they will also have
They will.
An office
Yep.
in that building, and they're really looking forward to
Yeah.
it. And we'll use that as an opportunity to get into the schools a little sooner
Yep.
and work with the schools. So they're really looking forward to it. And my other comment would be, I don't think anybody's gonna miss the yellow building, the yellow office.
Oh.
I've been in there. I don't think anyone will miss it. But do you have, Bob has a question.
Sheriff County is served by 3, maybe part of 4 school districts. How do you vision the equality if we're asked to, as a county, contribute to this, say Plainfield, Tri-County, and Coloma areas in the Westfield School District? Where is the equality going to be? Watoma students can walk over there. How are we going to get our kids there?
That's a great question. We've had very in-depth conversations with the superintendents at every one of the school districts, and they have no concerns at all about sending kids. Now, transportation, of course, has to be figured out by the school district, but they're desperate for opportunities, and they recognize this as a great way for kids to get a leg up.
Because I see you had Breakbush, and that is in Marquette County,
Yeah, and
obviously.
we've actually had multiple conversations with Breakbush, and they're on a fast track to grow, and they, like everybody else, they don't know where they're going to get their future employees from. But part of what we can bring to the table, and we go into the schools all the time and we talk about the types of training, and we can get into the schools. Breakbush has trouble getting into the schools. Nobody wants to talk to the chicken people. But if you talk about industrial maintenance and what kinds of careers industrial maintenance, that's what Breakbush does. So they're filled with Allen Bradley controllers, and they need people who know how to run those controllers. That's the type of training that we're talking about. Those are excellent starting jobs.
Breakbush is putting on an awful big $1 million.
They are, yep.
$1 million project.
Yep. We also, early in our conversation, so we worked closely with Mayville Engineering for a lot of years, but I asked them the question point blank, if we put a building in Watoma, will you put expansion dollars into your Watoma location? They said, absolutely yes. So, we have to produce the people, but they definitely are interested in expanding here. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation. All right, next we're going to go to a consideration and possible action on the following resolutions. Resolution number 24-11-17, resolution authorizing 1 additional employee for the Highway Department. The resolution is in your packet.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Weddy, second by Kirschner to approve. Do you have any questions or comments concerning this resolution? Yes, Bob.
If I read the minutes and the stuff that was handed out, this is a sunset position. If Springwater does not continue to do it, then the position will be cut. Is that correct?
That's what the resolution states. So right now, unless he can find funding somewhere else, if Springwater didn't continue their contract after the 3 years, he could always find funding somewhere else. But as long as he does that, then that position will keep going.
Commissioner Frymark does an excellent job of seeking work for our staff, and so essentially what this position will be almost entirely funded by the Springwater contract, and which is good because it benefits us, it keeps people working, it benefits the municipalities because it provides them services at a lower cost as well.
All right, any other questions? We have a motion and a second, and we need a roll call vote on this.
Mr. Tim?
Yes.
Mr. Cap?
Yes.
Mr. Weddy?
Yes.
Mrs. Colada?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Waddle?
Yes.
Mr. Rothermel?
Yes.
Mr. Kirschner?
Yes.
Mrs. Krentz?
Yes.
Mr. Heisey?
Yes.
Thank you. Next, we have resolution number 25-11-17, resolution authorizing reorganization of the Department of Land Conservation and Zoning for Waushara County. Motion by Kirschner, second by Waddle. Are there any questions or comments? Hearing none, we will have a roll call vote.
Mr. Cap?
Yes.
Mr. Weddy?
Yes.
Mrs. Colada?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Waddle?
Yes.
Mr. Rothermel?
Yes.
Mr. Kirschner?
Yes.
Mrs. Krentz?
Yes.
Mr. Heisey?
Yes.
Mr. Tim?
Yes.
Right, next we have resolution number 26-11-17, resolution approving the Waushara County 2018 budget appropriation. Do we have a motion? Motion by Cap,
Second.
second by Weddy.
Madam Chair, could Ms. Lucchini address the board? Just to explain how this is different than we've done previously.
Okay, sounds good.
Your budget book, you have two different versions. It's the same, nothing's changed other than the layout of the budget. The very first budget that you see is going away from the line item budget that you're used to seeing, and it's putting each of the department's programs and costs into categories. Those are the personnel, training and related, contracted services, your other supplies and expenses, and then the capital outlay projects. So I just wanted you to know that when we ask that you approve the budget tonight, we're approving it at this summary level instead of the line item level.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Any questions? Larry?
I've studied over the budget. I think that people that prepared the budget did a good job. But there is one item that I'm concerned about, and that has to do with library funding. There was a request by the library committee to increase the budget for libraries for WinFox, and that was denied. And the current budget shows no increase from last year, other than some small adjustments where the estimated cost to other counties for library services was decreased, and some of the other ones were increased a little bit. There was some adjustments in that way, but they were very small. It's been my belief and opinion for a long time that library funding in Waushara County is very unfair and inequitable. For example, the town where I live, the town of Saxville, pays is a joint library with the town of Leon, and we pay a little over $19,000 to support that library directly. Plus, we pay approximately $14,000 to the county toward the county subsidy that the county provides to all the libraries. some municipalities pay zero directly and only support the libraries by the money they pay toward the county subsidy. And I think that's very unfair because all citizens, residents of Waushara County have equal opportunity to use the libraries. And I don't think it's right that some municipalities have to pay a whole lot more than others. And the way to equalize this is through the county subsidy. And there are other possibilities that could be done. We could have a law change that would require all municipalities to belong to a library district and support a library. We could change the law to allow the local libraries to charge the towns or villages that don't support a library for the amount of use that they give to the local library. You know, there's different ways it could be done, but it would require a change in the state law, which is very difficult to accomplish and probably isn't going to happen, at least not in the near future. The Winnifox is part of their agreement with Waushara County. The information is on the handout that I provided to you earlier. Is responsible for coming up with a funding formula for the libraries in Waushara County and under an agreement with the county. And the procedure that they came up with, or that they're suggesting, is to figure out how much the municipalities that have a library are spending on libraries, and that information is on page 4. It has the 2016 data there, and the total that Waushara County libraries are spending on the libraries from municipal taxes is $272,253. And if you take it average based on the population of those, I think it's 8 libraries, municipalities where those libraries are located, it comes out to $35.26 per person, per resident of those areas. And the population, and that's on the previous page, page 3, the population of the municipalities that do not support a library or do not have a library in their jurisdiction is like 14,324. So if you multiply that by the amount that the towns that have a library are spending, it comes out to $505,064. And that was the amount that Winnifox suggested should be the amount of the total subsidy for Waushara County. They've done this each year for a number of years, and they, when they originally started this way back when, you know, the number was much smaller, and the county did support that figure. But over the years, in the late 90s and early 2000s, the subsidy was not increased. They just kept the same amount all the time. Because library expenses have substantially increased, the amount you have to pay for salaries has increased a whole lot. If you don't keep an increase in the subsidies at the same rate, the gap is going to get larger and larger between what the libraries that municipalities that don't have a library contribute versus the ones that do have a library that have to pick up what isn't subsidized. And if we don't increase our subsidy this year, the amount that we contribute to Winnifox, if we don't increase that this year, the gap is just going to get wider. The last 3-4 years since I've been on the Library Services Committee, we have requested an increase and we have received an increase. So the gap does not expand and actually closes up some. And if you look at page 3, another interesting statistic on the bottom of page 3 is that the population of the municipalities that have a library is 41.47% of the county population, yet that 41% of the population pays 57.69% of the cost of the libraries. So it shows that there are many municipalities that are not paying their share of the cost of operating libraries in the county. And for this reason, I would like to amend the budget to restore the requested appropriation.
The requested appropriation was 9%, wasn't it?
Yes.
In your sheet here, do you have anywhere? I know that some of these municipalities who don't have libraries do support the other libraries, and they support them pretty well. You know, I know Springwater
there are
does,
a few that
Marion
do.
does.
There are many that just give a few $100s,
Yeah.
considering the cost of operating these libraries is thousands of dollars. In most of cases, it's a drop in the bucket.
Madam Chair, so it's my understanding that Supervisor Tim has made a motion to amend the budget to restore the funding request that Winnifox made, which is approximately a 9% increase over last year. I suppose before I address that further, we need to find out if there's a second.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion in a second now. Would you?
Okay.
address the board?
I want to go ahead and speak about the budget process, and I'll start from the general and get to the specific. As you know, as we discussed last month and was included in the PowerPoint presentation, you as elected officials and have the function of setting public policy for the county. And actually, the vote that you're going to take tonight on the budget is probably the biggest decision you will make with regard to public policy, because what you'll be doing when you pass, reject, or amend the budget is you will be stating what the county's policies are and how that should be funded. Money is power, and you'll make a determination on what will be funded and how much. So my role and the role of my staff, such as Ms. Lucchini, is to formulate that budget to be presented to you. So we started this process back in August. We met with all the directors and we met with the folks from Winnifox as well. And we poured through this, and we had many hours of discussion, both amongst ourselves, the finance team, but also with the various departments and the folks from Winnifox. In fact, I will tell you, when they came to me with the request for the 9% increase, I told them that was probably not something I would be able to support by including in the budget, but I did invite them to go ahead and speak as part of their right as citizens to address you and to hopefully, at least hopefully for them, change your mind. The points that Supervisor Tim made are all well taken. I cannot disagree with any of them from a philosophical, big picture standpoint. Libraries are good. They're good for society. They're good for our kids. Libraries do wonderful things. Kids who read are kids who are going to be successful in life. They provide services not only to students, but to the community as a whole. In fact, in recent decades, libraries have gone from being just a place where you went to check out books and read periodicals. They're often now perform a sort of a community center function as well. In fact, one of the big things that people go to the library for is for internet access. Maybe they may not be able to afford it at home if they're looking for a job. Most jobs now, people look at that online, so the libraries are used extensively. I can't say that I would say that libraries shouldn't be better funded, but then again, as your administrator, I look at all the other functions of county government, and I can't say that law enforcement should be better funded. I can't say that our parks should be better funded. Human Services, the Health Department, EMS, Emergency Management, or even just building and grounds. There are lots of things here in this building that need to be fixed as well. So I have to deal with those competing interests. And as I mentioned earlier when we had the presentation from Fox Valley Technical College, the big problem that I have and that you have is our needs, our wants, our requests for expenses are continuing to climb, but our revenue sources are largely stagnant. And when it comes to budgeting for government, it's not unlike budgeting for your family. You divide things into two broad categories: your needs and your wants. So for your family, your needs would be you pay the rent, you pay the mortgage because you have to keep a roof over your head. You pay for your utilities because you need electricity, you need heat. You pay for food because people have to eat. You pay for clothing. Your wants would be things like maybe the Netflix subscription, the vacation to Disney World, the newer model car, things of that sort. The same thing is true for government. We have a number of needs that we must fund either by law. We have our courts that we have to fund by law. We have our different offices that are included in Wisconsin statutes that we have to fund, talking about the Register of Deeds, the county clerk, the treasurer, the sheriff, et cetera, those elected officials. And I would suspect that you and most members of the public would include in those needs law enforcement, because the primary goal of any government, whether it's the local, state, or national level, is the protection of persons and property. And in keeping with that would also be emergency medical services as well. Then we get into things that are more of wants. Those things, I will tell you from the municipal standpoint, are usually two things. They're parks and libraries. It doesn't mean that when it comes to looking at budgets that people don't think the parks and libraries are unimportant or not valuable. They are. But when you have to balance a budget, when you have much greater expenses than you have revenue, you have to look at what you can cut in order to balance your budget. So this isn't a situation that I've experienced in municipalities where you've seen parks and libraries cut in order to fund public safety. This is a situation when we went into this budget process that the libraries were not cut. We went to all the departments. The departments that are very popular with the public, such as the sheriff's office and emergency medical services, and we said to all of them across the board, we have to hold the line. We're looking at zero-based budgeting. And I will tell you, I was very, very pleased with the results of that. All of our directors were just outstanding, and they submitted good, sound numbers. They submitted numbers for things that they had to fund to maintain their operations, to serve the people with Sheriff County. And I make a point of that because I've been in jurisdictions where the budget process is sort of the haggling process for when you buy a used car. You know, you have the guy who's selling you the car, demanding a price that's much higher than what he'll actually accept, and you have the person who wants to buy the car offering something far less than what they're actually willing to pay. And so you have a situation in government budgeting with that sort of dysfunction where a department may say, I need $100,000 for this. I absolutely need it, but in fact they only need $80,000, so they're willing to settle for $90,000, and that puts them ahead of the game. Everybody submitted budgets that kept the line for the most part at 0%, and we expected nothing less from Winnifox as well. So it wasn't a situation where the library system was considered to be the lesser of our governmental functions. They were treated no better, no worse than we treated the sheriff or EMS or any of the other departments. Some things that I've handed out is this document that's printed in a landscape format. That was prepared by Mike Konecki, and it shows that the county has, I believe, and he believes, and he's a fellow who has far more experience with county government in Wisconsin because he's done work for a number of counties. He believes that we are funding libraries at an adequate level. In fact, probably funding libraries at a greater level than our sister counties do. One of the things that I wanted to point out is a 9% budget increase. If you're thinking about that, then you also have to ask yourself a couple of questions. First thing you need to ask, are the municipalities increasing their allocation to the libraries by 9%? I don't know. I haven't done the homework on that, but I suspect not. And I know Supervisor Tim made the point that some municipalities fund libraries at a much more generous level than others. But I disagree that the solution is for us to pick up the slack. I think that those decisions are policy decisions and they're political decisions on the municipal level. And if people are not happy with the level of support that their municipal government is providing to libraries, then the remedy is political. Then they need to elect different people. I don't see the remedy as the county taxpayers as a whole picking up the slack, because in effect what you're doing is you're letting municipal elected officials off the hook. They're not making the tough decisions because they don't have to, because they're passing the buck to you. So I want you to consider that. I also want you to consider the other sheet that I prepared earlier today, and I'll preface this is the sheet that's on the portrait format. I prepared that. I didn't prepare that as for discussion as to whether or not a 9% increase is warranted for various departments. I will preface all this by saying I know that all these departments have different functions. I know that they all have different funding sources. We heard earlier from Human Services when we were talking about the opioid situation. They get grants and other things like that. So that's not what I'm talking about. But what I prepared this for was just this general information that although we are near the finish line on this year's budget, this will happen again next year. And I will tell you that trust and respect that I developed with these department directors and that you have developed through me, this trust and respect, may be harmed because I went to these folks and I said, I know you need more money, I know you need more people. Every single department, in my opinion, every single function that we have here, none of those functions are understaffed or underfunded, but I asked them to sharpen their pencils and to come up with numbers that will allow us to provide the services that we need to provide and to protect the taxpayers so that we don't unduly burden them for their taxes. Our role is to be good stewards of public treasure, to only take what we need and to provide the best services we can with what we have. But I did take all of those functions and I added the 9%, and you see that it would be a sizable amount. And if we did this across the board next year, you're looking at a budget increase of about $4 million overall for the county. And I can tell you, we can't sustain that. Now, can we sustain 9% to Winnifox? Yes, we could. It won't affect the county's fiscal solvency, but what it will do is morale-wise, and it will create an environment where people will be resentful of the fact that we are showing special preference to one function of county government, and they will demand that preference be shown to them as well next year. The other thing I want to point out is next year myself and our labor negotiating team will be sitting down with the bargaining unit or union that represents our law enforcement officers. We're going to have to negotiate a new contract. And I can tell you from dealing with people in labor negotiations, if this 9% increase passes, they will come to the table. I fully expect them to, and they will say, if you can afford an additional 9% for your libraries, you sure can afford an additional 5, 6, 7, 8% for us, because what we do is important, and it is. So I want you to think about this not just in terms of the raw dollars and what the libraries do. I'm never going to argue with anyone who doesn't say that libraries do good and that they should be better funded, but I want you to look at it from a big picture and from the standpoint of where that will put us at the bargaining table next year and at the budget process next year as well. Obviously, we're not talking about a 9% increase across the board because we can't do it, but I will not get the numbers that I need, the real truthful numbers that I need for next year's budgeting process, and I'm afraid that trust and respect, that relationship that I have with the directors and that you have with the directors would be harmed by suddenly showing special preference for this particular budget item. Thank you.
I'd just like to make a couple comments on the library situation. We have the same problem in Red Granite, and I'm on the board down there. And so we put our heads together and kind of smacked them around a little bit, and we took everybody that works down there for the library got a pay raise. But we took a half an hour off of their time on some of the days so that they were getting the same amount of money that they're getting now, but they're going to have to work a little less and they're getting more money for it. And we also found that the people around town were ready to kick in a little bit more themselves. The village kicked in a little bit more, and we went after everybody we could, and we managed to come out with a little shape. So I understand where you're coming from with the thing and everything, and we fought through it, and we're probably going to be all right. But
And that's good management, and it's good policy making too. Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a comment. I think a library serves the same function as the Fox Valley Technical School does. It's a learning place, for people to go get an education, and, they have people there that help them. They help train them on computers. They help them, with taking out books and doing what they need to do. Now, in our instance, our library for the town of Leon and the town of Saxville, there's a shared library. I can remember just a few years ago, we were contributing as a township. Each of our townships contributed about $12,000. It was only a few years after that we were contributing $15,000. And I haven't seen our budget for 2018, but for 2017 we contributed $19,000. So our share keeps going up, but we're not getting enough funding from the county to help offset that.
And I don't disagree with the function that libraries play, or Fox Valley, or any of the other county departments or functions. My job, what you hired me to do, is to look at this from the broad overall viewpoint. So I have to deal with those competing interests, and in doing that, meeting with my directors, meeting with my finance team, the budget that we presented to you is, I believe, the best budget that we can present, that treats all the governmental functions, all the departments equally, provides the necessary services to the public. No, it's not the level of service we would like to provide, because if we did provide the level of service we would like to provide, we would basically bankrupt the taxpayers, because we simply don't have the revenue to do that. Now, your job tonight will be to decide whether or not to accept, reject, or amend that budget. That is your right, and I'm not going to argue that you don't have the right to do that. And regardless of what you do, even if it's policy formulation that I may disagree with personally, my role as your administrator is to carry out that policy and to make it reality. So I want you to know, no matter what you do tonight, I will carry out your wishes. But it's also my role to offer advice, and I think in the long term it is not a good decision to make, because it will impact future budgets, demands on the taxpayers, and it will affect morale and trust and respect that we have with our departments and our various managers.
Question there?
I just wanted to make a comment. I don't mean any disrespect to you, Mr.
None
Civic,
taken.
but I don't think you understand the history of the situation with the library funding. This other gentleman hasn't been with the county that long either. I don't think he likewise understands the history of it. And the reason for the request for an increase is to correct some discrepancies and some bad decisions in the past to make the funding for the libraries more fair. Like I said originally, there's a lot of years where no adjustments were made in the library subsidy. And consequently, the gap between what they should have been getting and what they got just increased. And I don't think that the funding for the library really has anything to do with the funding for the other departments in the county, as far as them expecting a 9% increase next year.
It doesn't, no, and nor will I say that this funding increase will bust the budget. It will not.
The total is only about 45,000.
Right, and but my point is that what it will do is it will go ahead and it will create an increase, a substantial increase for Winnifox, where that increase has not been something that we've done for the other departments. And I will tell you, I believe that resentment will not only just come from the increase itself, it will also come from the fact that the money we use to fund the sheriff and parks and everything else, that's money that you control and that I manage. The money we use for Winnifox is something that's outside of our control. Essentially what we do is we give people money and we hope they do the best with it. That will probably also be something that may rub people the wrong way. But regardless, whether or not we agree on policy is not something that I take offense at, and I hope you don't take offense at that. I'm just playing my role and offering you advice as part of the budget process. But regardless of what you do, your staff will make it a reality, and we will do the best we can.
I feel it's very hard to tell our department heads that you have to keep it at 2%. We don't have any more money. That's it. And then when a Fox comes in and asks for 9%, we've been over this with them. I'm on that committee with you. And last year, I think it was, they asked for 11%. And how can we expect our department heads to do what we ask and then turn around and give Winnifox 9%? I just don't understand how we can do that. So, are there any other questions or comments?
Does it have to be 9%?
Well, that's the motion right now. So first you would need to vote on that 9% amendment.
Okay.
And then we could.
Another one could be brought up at a lesser. Okay.
Yeah, I think one of the concerns is that all the county employees are getting a 2% salary increase. And these libraries are in a position where because they're part of municipalities, they're going to be getting raises associated with what the municipalities are giving there, like the county 2% probably, 1.5%, and so that's part of the issue I see.
Is the issue you're referring to, is it that the library employees are not getting the 2%, they're getting something less than that?
Well, they're probably going to get the 2%. It'd be fair, as you stated before, with other fellow county employees, that it's if the union employees are getting a 2% increase, it's only fair that the other employees within the county also get that 2%. And so is it not fair for the libraries, for their employees to get that 2% also? I guess that's part of the issue.
I think certainly from a moral standpoint, yes, that is fair. But I do need to remind you again that the money you use to subsidize the libraries is not money that you control. A comment was made last month by a representative of the library, by a representative of one of our libraries, that the county employees were getting 2%, and it would only be fair for it to increase the subsidy so that the library employees would get 2%. And I would respond to that by saying the reason why your county employees are getting 2% is because you have some really top-notch managers here. We have our department directors and with our finance team, and they've been able to, and I'm not kidding, to squeeze out 2% to give to those employees. That's good management. Now, if the libraries aren't doing that or they're not doing it well enough, I don't see that again as your responsibility as county supervisors. You're required to provide subsidization pursuant to Wisconsin law, but you're not doing anything illegal. I don't want to sound like Ebenezer Scrooge here, but I think your primary focus should be on the things that you fund directly and that you manage directly, and that is county government. These other things, I do need to tell you that that is money that once it goes outside of the county coffers, you no longer have control over it. And I would say that you probably don't have responsibility over whether or not it's being managed correctly, and there's nothing you can do about it if it isn't. And I would say you're not necessarily responsible for making up the shortfall that the towns and the municipalities may have in funding those libraries. If that argument was made, you know, the state of Wisconsin could say, we're not funding education well enough, so we want the counties to kick in more for that. We don't have that kind of money to be generous. It would be nice if we did. But so I'm telling you that this is not something that's a good idea for a couple of reasons. Number one, it will create a demand for larger budgets, which we cannot sustain. Number two, philosophically, it's probably not a good idea to take one governmental function and treat it differently than the others. And number three, it's going to breed resentment amongst my managers and your managers.
Yes, Larry.
You said we don't have any control over the local libraries. We do. We have representatives from the county board that's sitting on each library. We have representatives sitting on the Winnifox board, so we do have some control.
Right, but you don't have direct control. I mean, you have a seat at the table, but you are not the person who's going to control it.
But we watch very closely to see that the tax dollars that are given to the libraries are used responsibly, and I think in almost all cases they are.
And I don't think there's money being wasted. Again, to come back to this, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, what I'm dealing with is competing and all of them worthwhile financial interests, but at some point we have to set a standard, and we set a standard going into this budget process, and we presented a budget with that standard, treating all departments, all governmental functions the same. And what my concern is, it's not, again, that the budget's going to be busted if this increased funding for Winnifox takes place. It's going to be that it's going to make my job more difficult, not only in budgeting next year, but also Ruth and I for labor negotiations, and it breeds resentment. One of the things I've really tried to do is I want people to feel that they can trust and that their leadership, whether it's leadership, you elected leadership, or management leadership, that there is a relationship of respect and trust here. And we went into the situation and we told them, we can't afford the types of increases that you want, so you need to sharpen your pencils. You really need to find a way to keep the costs low. And they have done that. And now you're going to go ahead, your proposal is to change that for one particular function. Well, regardless of what you do, we will carry it out.
I agree with you. I think the towns need to do a better job at supporting their libraries in this county. But that's not something, by us giving them an additional 9%, that's not going to fix that. What you need to do is go to the towns. Maybe it's something that the towns associations should start talking about, and try and get all the townships to kick in their share. Yes.
One more comment. That is, I think most of you know that I'm one of the more frugal members of the board and vote against a lot of expenditures. I may not be very popular in that regard either, but I do feel that this is an inequity at the county funding and needs to be corrected.
Any other questions or comments? All right, yes. All right, that will be an I no vote, and this is on the amendment to change the budget to increase the libraries, or to Winnifox 9%. Right?
Mr. Weddy?
No.
Mrs. Collada?
No.
Mr. King?
No.
Mr. Wadel?
No.
Mr. Rothermel?
No.
Mr. Kirschner?
No.
Mrs. Krentz?
No.
Mr. Heisey?
Yes.
Mr. Tim?
Yes.
Mr. Cap?
No.
All right, and now we are going to take up the vote, the resolution approving the Sheriff County 2018 budget appropriation. Yes, Bob?
Could we make another amendment to that? The library funding?
Whatever your little heart desires.
Probably won't do any good, but I would recommend that, or make a motion that they increase it to 2%, that some of the other staff got in that, to keep it.
All right. You want to increase the library funding by 2%?
Well, that's, yes.
Is there a second to that motion? Second by Cap. All right. Any questions or comments? All right.
Mrs. Collada?
No.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Waddell?
Yes.
Mr. Rothermel?
Yes.
Mr. Kirschner?
Yes.
Mrs. Krentz?
Yes.
Mr. Heisey?
Yes.
Mr. Tim?
Yes.
Mr. Cap?
Yes.
Mr. Eckstein is absent. And Mr. Weddy?
Yes.
Nine ayes, one nay.
All right, that passes. And we will increase the library funding by 2%. If we approve the budget. One slight thing here. All right, we have a motion and a second. And this will include the 2% that we're raising the libraries. And we need an I know vote for that.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Waddell?
Yes.
Mr. Rothermel?
Yes.
Mr. Kirschner?
Yep.
Mrs. Krentz?
Yes.
Mr. Heisey?
Yes.
Mr. Tim?
Yes.
Mr. Cap?
Yes.
Mr. Weddy?
Yes.
Mrs. Collada?
Yes. Okay, the budget is passed. Thank you very much for all your hard work on the budget. We know that it's not an easy, so we thank you. Next, we have resolution number 27-11-17, acknowledgement of Kathleen Kepke service to and retirement from Waushara County.
Motion to approve.
I'll second that.
Would you go ahead and read the resolution, please?
Whereas Waushara County wishes to take this opportunity to express its appreciation to Kathleen Kepke for over 26 years of service and dedication to Waushara County, and whereas acknowledgement is given to Kathleen for the conscientious and devoted service she gave to the Department of Aging, Department of Social Services, Project Rebound, the Department of Community Programs, and finally the Department of Human Services throughout the many years. Now therefore be it resolved by the Waushara County Board of Supervisors that the County Board, on behalf of the grateful residents of Waushara County, does hereby commend Kathleen Kepke for her years of service to the residents of Waushara County, and every good wish goes to her for a fruitful, wonderful retirement filled with contentment and joy.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, next we have a proclamation recognizing November 2017 as National Family Caregivers Month. Do you have that proclamation, Megan?
Whereas over 90 million Americans today are family caregivers for their loved ones, and whereas a large number of caregivers are finding themselves providing care 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and whereas caregiving affects the whole family and 6 out of 10 family caregivers juggle everyday life tasks such as preparing the children for school, managing household responsibilities, and working full or part-time while caring for a senior with Alzheimer's or other long-term care concerns or a child with special needs. And whereas although caregiving can be a rewarding experience, it is not without its consequences such as stress, poor health, and caregiver burnout. And whereas providing support to a family caregiver protects their personal health, strengthens family relationships, prevents burnout, and can enable a care recipient to stay at home up to 3 times longer. And whereas the responsibility of family caregivers in our country growing every year, it is even more essential to encourage these heroes to seek support from others and to take time for respite so they may continue their mission of providing loving care. Now therefore be it resolved that Waushara County Board of Supervisors does hereby recognize November 2017 as National Family Caregivers Month with the theme Caregiving Around the Clock, and encourages caregivers to utilize support and services available to them throughout the year.
I would like to add that I'm aware that Commission on Aging does a fantastic job with the caregivers group that they have organized, and I've heard a lot of good feedback from that. We appreciate it. Thank you. We have a motion and a second for the proclamation. We did that already, didn't we? Oh, okay. Thank you, Dennis. Second by Bernadette. Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. And we need, I would like to thank everyone for coming tonight. We've got a larger crowd than usual, and we appreciate it. Thank you very much. All right, we need board suggestions for future agenda items. Yes.
I spoke to you about the ATV trails on county roads, that there had been a number of constituents that had spoke about that and asked that we at least consider it. And I believe it's held up in a committee right now, and the county board as a whole has not had an opportunity to speak on that. You made the suggestion that we possibly would have some sort of forum to do so, somewhere that we could hear both sides of the issue, and maybe as a board, as a whole board, have an opportunity to then make our feelings known or have an opportunity to vote.
I don't know that a forum of some sort is going to work for this. It's not held up in committee. I think the Public Works Committee did not want to go ahead with it, and Public Safety didn't either, as far as I'm concerned. We have our experts in the county, the sheriff, our highway commissioner, and that's who we have listened to. They feel it's a safety issue, and it's not good on our roads either. What do you call that? Not the road itself, but the shoulder. Destroys the shoulder of the roads. Is that correct?
Well, what happened in the past is we did have a board member discuss that issue here, and it wasn't on the agenda, and I guess the last time I brought this up,
We had a board member that discussed it.
the pros and cons, or at least the cons against it.
Are you talking about me?
No.
I don't remember that. Well,
I'll defer to Corporation Council. Internal rules obviously the board controls its own agenda. Can individual board members place something on the agenda, or must it go through the committee structure?
It usually goes through the committee structure, but that's why we have future suggested items. And so if the board wishes to have it on the agenda, they can go on the agenda.
Is that, can an individual board member do so, or, okay, so if an individual board member wants to do that, and I assume, Mr. King, you wish to do that?
Yes.
And do you wish to do it for next month's meeting?
Yes.
And then I pursuant to our rules, it will go on the agenda, and we'll discuss it.
okay. Thank you, Bob. And Ruth. All right. Anything else? Yes.
To adjourn.
Thank you, Bob. We have a motion by Bob, second by Larry.
He wasn't here.
Okay, Everett.
All in
We'd be waiting
favor?
a long time.
We are adjourned.
We'd be waiting a long time for Everett to make the motion.
It's a good thing we don't take a knee. I'd have to get you up.
Yeah.
Gave him a little bit, but.
Not what we wanted, but.
Oh, no, we have an IT person who does that.
What is
He might be the one you want.
about message with this saying that we're out of compliance with our reporting?
He wasn't too concerned about it. He mentioned it.
Mention it,
But he,